This is Rukadowski and Jason Burmis of WeAreChange.org, and as you all know, there's a huge, mega PR media war happening right now between Alex Jones and Joe Rogan, and that's why in this video, me and Jason want to tell you about the latest developments and our own personal kind of made-up assessments on who is figuratively winning the bigger PR war here. And Jason, why not? Let's also maybe even discuss what would happen in a cage match between Joe Rogan and Alex Jones. But personally, before we get into all that, I blame you, Jason, for absolutely all of this.
Oh boy, for those that don't know, back in the day when InfoWars was actually producing my material and I was living in Austin, Texas, I was a big MMA fan then, as I am now. And Rogan and Jones had a relationship since the late 90s. For those that don't know, Joe actually called in on the 9/11 show, trying to argue with Alex because he was already calling it a government inside job, talking about bombs in the building, the whole nine. And Rogan was upset. Now, on top of that, Jones is in one of his comedy DVs, Belly of the Beast, where they both dress up like Bush and Son and go around in cloaks, and that intros the DVD. So they had a long history, and I was like, you know what? Even after you're falling out because of some Fear Factor stuff, there was the horse drink. We'll call it that, the horse drink.
That's a nice way of saying it there, Jason.
Yes, the horse drink. And then, people being like needled through their body, some dehumanizing stuff, and that really caused a rift. But they ended up getting back together, and obviously Rogan is now like the biggest thing in podcasting out there. Jones's empire has only grown, and unfortunately, especially recently, Luke, they have been butting heads.
Well, people have to understand here, there's a big history here, and this feud actually was going back even before Joe Rogan had Jack Dorsey on. Even a couple days before that, Alex Jones had Jan Irvin, supposedly the person that introduced Joe Rogan to DMT and ayahuasca to, on, kind of bashing him for an hour, and Alex is kind of going off on a lot of kind of hyperbolic, made-up things, talking about how the CIA is pushing DMT and ayahuasca. Again, a lot of those things haven't been confirmed, a lot of assumptions being made, but I do believe essentially that there are still some legitimate criticisms of Joe Rogan that do need to be taken very seriously, because he is supported by the Cash App. Some people even make the estimates that he receives quite a lot of money from that sponsorship, which is directly tied into Jack Dorsey, which of course is controversy all erupted because people are accusing him of being very soft-handed on him. And some people are estimating that Joe Rogan gets $300,000 per month from the Cash App and an estimated $3.5 million per year from that larger kind of sponsorship. And that's why a lot of people were kind of very disappointed with Joe Rogan when especially the question turned to Alex Jones, where Joe Rogan specifically asked Jack Dorsey, why was Alex Jones banned? And people noticeably saw a major body shift in the CEO of Jack Dorsey. We saw him kind of recoil. We saw him stutter. We saw him lose eye contact and say, I have no idea why. And a lot of people don't believe that because rightfully so, they shouldn't. This is a billionaire, and if he is either completely gone from major decisions from this huge institution of power, Twitter, there's no other explanation for this, and Joe kind of let it by. Kind of let it swing and kind of change the topic right away when he personally knows individuals who were censored, were banned, not just Alex Jones, but other individuals. And the bias is very clear here. There's a reason Saudi Arabia and high Saudi royal officials are investing so much in Twitter and have such a majority ownership of Twitter. This is because Twitter is a main political weapon and it is being used in many different ways. We saw many anti-war figures like Kerry Wedler be completely banned without explanation, without reasons. We're seeing people targeted within the Venezuelan government, within the Syrian government, obviously serving bigger geopolitical U.S. goals. And we clearly do see a bigger kind of political bias when it comes to him, Joe Rogan, and Jack Dorsey. Excuse me, let me just focus on Jack Dorsey here. With Jack Dorsey banning people for saying that the people who are getting fired right now should learn to code, like we saw tweeted by a Daily Caller editor who now had his account suspended because he just tweeted, "Learn to code," to the mainstream media that is obviously losing their jobs right now. People who also bring up facts that fatherless homes lead to more crimes are also being banned. While, of course, there's literally a New York Times Asian lady just putting out a full-on war onslaught against white people, and she gets verified. We're seeing the coveting kids being called to be doxxed, being called for harm to be done to them by major celebrities, major media figures. No banning at all. Huge discrepancies, huge political war happening here. And Joe Rogan, who says he believes in the rights of people to communicate with each other, to give everyone a platform, everyone thought he was going to make a strong stance on that, and he didn't. And this is why there's been a lot of questions. Now, of course, Joe Rogan answered back, of course, against Alex Jones as well, and answered back even mentioning how Media Matters said that Alex Jones was lying. And when you talk about Media Matters and Alex Jones, you pretty much have some of the most erroneous institutions of media out there, because Media Matters is supported by George Soros. Alex Jones does say a lot of hyperbolic stuff, which, Jason, you're going to get into as well, because Alex Jones is kind of going all off, literally calling to God himself, God, to rage this war against Joe Rogan, and it's only getting crazier from here, right, Jason?
It absolutely is only getting crazier from here, my friend. So let's wheel it back a little bit. Let's talk about the thunder that erupted because of the Dorsey thing, because I think here we do have some valid points on both sides. So when you look at the Dorsey interview, Rogan said that he disclosed that he was a sponsor through the Cash App. I'm not sure if he did that. I didn't watch the entire interview. Maybe he did so in another interview, but he absolutely was taking that money.
If I could interrupt, he should have been more transparent with that. His main comment was, I think I mentioned it, if you're taking money from Jack Dorsey's company and you're interviewing him, I think you have to talk about it. I think you do have to mention it when it's on such a large scale of influence and power and money, and that much money.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do have that, and Jones was right about that. That is a legitimate criticism. There's a legitimate criticism when he didn't follow up on things like using facial recognition. Again, another legitimate criticism.
And the criticism, I think, is more valid when you look at Joe Rogan's other interviews when he's interviewing people like Steven Crowder and Candace Owens, and he's going at them hard. He's questioning them. He's not letting them get by with any easy, lazy answer. He's being very vigilant, and we haven't seen that with a lot of other figures on the completely other political side. This is another argument that people are making, of course, against Joe Rogan.
Yes, absolutely. And let's continue just a little bit further. And Rogan really has not been honest about George Soros and what Jones has said about him. And we have to acknowledge that. For instance, when we talk about Media Matters, that is a George Soros, David Brock institution. And there is great documentation, not only with interviews from Soros himself, but that he was taken in by a Nazi collaborator. His name was Kiss Sander, and yes, he too also worked with Nazis, making him a Nazi collaborator in taking people's property. That is absolutely 100% factual. That doesn't mean, he was by the side of Hitler zig hailing, but in those interviews, he's certainly not remorseful or regretful about it. So let's be clear about that. So that gives all credence to Jones. Let's swing it around now for a second. The things that Jones has said about Rogan, first of all, before the Dorsey interview, being a CIA puppet, essentially. You watch that interview, and that's where he starts to go off the rails.
Now, you bring up a good point here, Jason, because Alex Jones is definitely really great at kind of bringing up extremely crazy points and then walking them back and being like, I never said that. Which, of course, Joe Rogan also accuses him of doing when he talked about Sandy Hook on his podcast, saying essentially what Alex Jones was saying was not true.
Exactly. So let's go back to the main thing with Sandy Hook. And anyway, Jones wants to spin it. There was a point in time where he called the thing a completely synthetic event with actors. So, aside from Sandy Hook, what is Alex Jones talking about that's not true? Well, number one, the way he's attacked Rogan, and he's got a snake, and he's calling him Snake Joe, and he's twisting his his neck and calling him a tough jujitsu guy. I guess we'll get into the fight later, but that is comical. Then at one point, he literally says, and I quote, and we're gonna play this for you, because I'm clear to fire, dude. Jesus, who you hate so much, said, Jesus told me to destroy Joe Rogan.
Because I'm clear to fire, dude. Jesus, who you hate so much, said, Jesus told me to destroy Joe Rogan.
Now, next, I don't think Joe Rogan has ever said he hates Jesus. He's never been a religious guy, but he certainly acknowledged the good points of religion. He actually talks about being agnostic and believing something beyond, especially after those DMT trips that Alex Jones is condemning so much that there may be an afterlife or something more to this. So he's being very dishonest there. Let's all be honest. When we play this clip, you look at Jones's face. Even Jones knows he didn't talk to Jesus, and Jesus didn't tell him to destroy anybody, let alone Joe Rogan, Luke.
Well, Alex is just going off. He's talking about, Italian guys in Vegas. He's making so many just generalized, off-the-wall topics that he's not being specific about and showing absolutely no evidence about. So that definitely needs to be called out as well because, again, Alex Jones says the most craziest stuff and then comes back I never said that. What? No, I don't know what you're talking about. And then just this fast talk pacing thing where he essentially always just creates his own kind of reality. And some of the stuff he says is not only hyperbolic, but just straight out wrong about Joe Rogan. And if they're true, show us some evidence, which he's not. And he's going from literal walnut sauce, pineal gland.
Well, Luke, on top of that, while he's going off on his little Rogan rant here, he starts talking about viral videos, and he starts talking about, I produced Loose Change, dude. And 187 million hits before they erased it on Google Video. Now, that part is, again, that's him spinning the truth. So, just so everybody understands, Alex Jones produced Loose Change Final Cut. Loose Change Second Edition had nothing to do with him. In fact, Joe Rogan actually bought the film before Alex Jones even carried it. So let's get that little factoid out there. Joe Rogan was the first guy to buy it off our website. He bought a 10-pack, okay? And Jones still had not even contacted us at that point. He produced Loose Change Final Cut. Now, 2 Final Cuts credit, probably online, maybe over 10. Let's give it 20 million views. Not 187 million views, had nothing to do with that, but he's going to tell you, I'm not jealous. And he actually calls Rogan jealous. He also says that he was bigger on YouTube than Rogan. Now, again, overall, since InfoWars has been around forever, maybe more views. But if you looked at not only Joe Rogan's podcast, if you looked at JRE Clips, King Joe Rogan, and the other dozen bootleg things out there with Rogan, there is no doubt in the past few years that Rogan has been much larger. And then he says he's going to take him down. Well, I hate to tell you, but Rogan's not going anywhere. He appeals to a large audience. That doesn't mean I agree with everything that he says, but I enjoy his long format of a 2 to 3 hour interview with someone. Yep. Alex Jones used to do 2 hour long interviews with people. Yeah, he would interrupt a lot, but those long form interviews are long gone.
Yeah. I was on some of those. You were on some of those as well. But I think let's talk to you about this kind of longer PR war that's happening here, because from what I see happening here, obviously a lot of people are being extremely divided on major sides here. But as far as PR-wise, I think Alex Jones is winning at what he wants, which is attention, and he's doing anything and saying anything for it. And we're talking about him because of that. So as far as attention-wise and people paying attention and clicking and looking at him, I think Alex Jones wins that specific portion. But as far as just explaining himself, I think Joe Rogan has definitely done a better job at that. And it does have to be pointed out that Joe Rogan is coming off very kind of naive. Now, either he's pretending to be naive or he's really naive because he's quoting Media Matters and saying, well, Jack Dorsey, this billionaire Saudi Arabian funded huge technocrat who has politicized and made Twitter a big political weapon, he's telling me that it's not true, so it's not true, even though a lot of the body of evidence kind of shows that it's not. So I think that is all going to be figured out with Jack Dorsey coming back on the show. And if Jack Dorsey does not come back on the show, on the Joe Rogan Experiment, to be kind of questioned on these very big important issues, this is going to be overall a bigger loss for Joe Rogan, who at the time right now, his reaction does deserve some scrutiny, but makes sense in the long term. That's kind of my assessment. What's yours?
I think so too. Rogan has said he's offered to come back on. He says he's going to ask tougher questions. He's going to follow up. We'll see where that goes. Again, I'm not that hopeful because you have one end where you don't think Joe Rogan can be that naive, especially being around somebody like Eddie Bravo. You know, Eddie Bravo's super conspiratorial, so at some point he hears them all, what he believes, what he knows to be true. Who knows? But for instance, attacking Jones for some of the pedogate stuff, the Jimmy Savile raping corpses, Jones is right. That has absolutely been proven. That's something that's been put out there by law enforcement. It's extremely disturbing. The adrenochrome stuff, whether they, are taking that from pituitary glands. I've seen that in other reports. I don't know that I've seen it in the Seville case. So again, that may be one of those things that's being misconstrued and Rogan may have a point on. So what I tell the audience is this: there's no way you can keep your eyes off of this. Jones, like you said, kind of does need this attention. After all, he's been deplatformed. He's lost a lot of revenue. He's probably feeling it. No matter what he says out there, yes, in the very beginning, that sent a lot of people to his platform at first, but nobody left YouTube. You know what I'm saying? Nobody left YouTube, Luke. And Rogan's got that voice, got that platform, and many others. So in that respect, I am sympathetic to Jones, but how long it lasts, I don't know. And I hope that both of them do get together on one of their larger platforms and kind of hash this out.
I want to see a cage match. I think it would be interesting to see a WWE style. This is essentially what it is, though, pretty much. Just wrestling, but in the media world, where we have Alex. The answer to 1984 is 1999 plus shipping and handling on one side of the ring. Another side of the ring, we have Joe, the toe snake, Rogan on another one. Close the cage, let them have at it. I mean, I just see a whole. What do you think would happen in a cage match? I mean, they're both about the same height. They're both about kind of the same weight. I mean, it would be a crazy fight.
No, it wouldn't. It would be very simple. And here's the deal: you could. Let's do it for...
Alex would rip his shirt up, start pounding his chest, right? Charging at Rogan. What happens next?
He would say that he was anointed by God to defeat Joe Rogan, even though I don't know of anybody that's actually physically talked to Jesus or God for that matter, or any of their deities, but that's beyond the point. First of all, you'd have to outlaw striking just on Rogan's end, right? And allow...
No holds barred cage match. What happened?
Again, just to try to make it fair for Alex, you'd have to bar all strikes from Rogan. Rogan did karate for decades. One spin...
Doesn't matter. What happens? Just give me the run-by-run, play-by-play here.
If Rogan can strike, Alex charges, Rogan side kicks him, and that's the end of the fight.
Yeah, but Alex is going to pull some crazy stuff. You know he's going to try to bite an ear off or or do something crazy.
Luke, the horse kick makes it over immediately. He's going to kick him across the thing. He will collapse in pain and say he ate a big bowl of chili before the match, and that was it. Now, let's say, for instance, Rogan cannot strike. This is how the match goes. Alex, again, charges at Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan then sidesteps him, takes his back, and chokes him until he taps. Because I guarantee you, as country boy and tough as Alex thinks he is, he's not going to sleep. He will tap before he goes to sleep.
I definitely see Alex pulling a metal chair out of nowhere all the time. sneak attack wouldn't surprise me in this matter. But overall, the reason we're laughing is because if we weren't laughing, we'll be crying at this situation, to be completely honest with you. And that's what you got to do. You just got to kind of make the light of it. Again, these are just our opinions. If you think we're wrong, or if you have any predictions of what would happen in the steel cage between Joe Rogan and Alex Jones, let us know in the comment section below. I'm right now off to Paris to do some on-the-ground reporting. We're going to be back also Saturday for 4 p.m. Eastern live stream. Saturday, not Sunday. We usually do them Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern. We're changing that right now to Saturday. So tune in Saturday, 7 p.m., 4 p.m. Eastern for the live show.